Lords, I thank the Noble Lord Knight of Weymouth for securing this debate. I'm interested in the Noble Lord's suggestion of a subscription model for universities for lifelong learning, although not just because, as someone who spent about 8.3 years full-time equivalent in universities, I do rather well out of that model. But nonetheless, I'm going to stick with the Green Party understanding that education is a public good which should be paid for from general taxation, far more progressive taxation than we have now, rather than being a weight on an individual. I commend the Noble Lord particularly for the phrasing of the question in looking at the social and personal value of lifelong learning, as well as the economic value. To be an informed voter, a parent able to help their children navigate a fast-changing world in the age of shocks, to contribute to your community as a citizen, lifelong learning is not a nice-to-have or an add-on, but an essential basis for health and survival, both individually and collectively. However, I'm going to turn one word in the question around and focus on the importance of unlearning what we might have previously been taught, acknowledging that science and knowledge is not one fixed certainty or a tower built on solid foundations, progressing forward with stately certainty. As a society, as individuals, we need to unlearn much. I'm 58 years old, and much of what I was taught at school and early university, from the supposition of DNA providing a blueprint for life, to the so-called primitiveness of hunter-gatherer life, and the inevitability of the tragedy of the commons, so-called, all of that was absolutely, demonstrably wrong. Much of the thinking of the 20th century, which often in the global north claimed universality, but in fact was highly particular to the ideology and the interests of the few at that moment, has been disproved or simply surpassed in a huge volume of knowledge generation we've seen in recent decades, and just starting, knowledge recovery from Indigenous and other cultures. 3 examples. Students are still taught, and the media extols in expensively produced wildlife documentaries and casual news commentaries, that the life on this planet is built on the foundation of competition. Yet everyone should know how the 20th century giant of biology, Lynn Margulis, developed understanding of symbiosis, the cooperation between species, the source of mitochondria and chloroplasts, is the origin and foundation of all complex life forms, and understand how soils are a cooperative production of more than human life and non-living entities, not an inert chemical substrate, as I was taught at university. If the very foundation of life is cooperation, not competition, our view of the world and our society has to change. And the so-called central dogma of US biologist James Watson, the physicist, eugenicist and misogynist, after whom astonishingly the new research centre at St Pancras was named, has been substantively debunked, yet is still widely taught. And then there's the tragedy of the commons, all too often taught as a fact rather than the fantasy of Garrett Hardin, a would-be applier of coercive population control. Resources being held in private ownership was the only way we were told to protect them. Yet it was in 1990 that later Nobel Economics Prize winner Elinor Ostrom published Governing the Commons, The Evolution of Institutions for Collective Action. Now, the Noble Lady the Minister frequently speaks to us about the government's curriculum review. I hope that the curriculum review, and indeed the curriculums and approaches of our colleges, universities, all the further education approaches, everything from the University of the Third Age to skeptics in the pub, they're all going to adopt knowledge for the 21st century, because that's what we need in this century.